Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Among phrases that cause anxiety, "we need to talk" ranks high, especially when it's followed by a formal address to a partner. When my wife's usual Seb turned into Sebastian, I sensed a foreboding shift. The end was near. I had already hired a private investigator, a man who looked like he stepped straight out of a classic film, to set up a recording device in a hotel room. This room was where my wife, Nora, shared her time with her boss, Daniel Taylor. Taylor, recently appointed as the executive vice president of sales at the company, appeared in every photo alongside my wife, each one attesting to an undeniable closeness between them. These images made my next steps clear. I resolved to get revenge. My plan required patience, and I maintained an outward calm, biding my time for the right moment. The next week dragged on endlessly. Nora, who once eagerly shared details of her workday with me, now spoke less and less, as if words slipped away from her with each passing evening. I asked her questions. "How was your day? Who did you have lunch with? How's the new boss?" Each time she hesitated, gave a vague answer, and then quickly changed the subject. Our evenings grew heavy with silent tension, while the detective continued his close watch. Every Friday, like clockwork, Taylor would step out to call clients mid-morning. 10 minutes later, Nora would leave the office, claiming she had an appointment with the chiropractor. Their destination was a cheap motel on the edge of town. With all the evidence gathered, I was ready to expose their affair when the time was right. My moment arrived. I stopped by the company shortly after Nora left, and asked Maria, the secretary, to pass her a message. Her husband had come by to surprise her with an invitation to lunch. Maria smiled politely and replied, "Oh, Mr. Brown, your wife just left for a doctor's appointment." Every time, it seemed, this doctor's appointment took precedence over lunch together. "Thank you," I said, trying not to show any reaction, though inside I was burning. I already had my phone ready, knowing Nora wouldn't dare ignore a call during a busy reporting period. The phone rang, and I heard her cheerful, practiced voice. "Good afternoon, this is Nora Brown." I steadied myself. "Is everything all right?" I asked. She paused, surprised. "What's going on?" I told her that I had come by to surprise her with lunch, only to find out she had gone to her usual Friday appointment. I tried to sound as calm as possible, asking, "Are you all right?" Her answer was cold. Just a routine chiropractor visit. But there was an edge of irritation in her tone, as if, according to plan, her tension was bound to spill over later when she met with her partner. "Funny," I replied. "I recently saw Dr. Vilchak, and he mentioned he hadn't seen you for over a year. Asked if you'd found another doctor." Silence fell on the line. "So, what's the name of your new chiropractor?" She snapped back, "I don't have time to discuss this now. We'll talk in the evening," and hung up. Fridays were usually our pizza night, and this evening was no exception. I was just tipping the delivery guy when Nora's car pulled into the garage. "Finally," I muttered as she walked through the door. "I feel unwell," she mumbled, passing me and heading straight upstairs. Shortly after, the bathroom door closed behind her. Hours later, when I joined her in bed, she lay there, still awake. I leaned in and quietly asked one last question. Why all the secrecy around the doctor visits? Is there something I should know? I was resolute. "Nora, I can't go on like this anymore. You need to let me in. Tell me what's happening." She waved me off, barely meeting my eyes. "Please don't push me," she muttered. "Honestly, everything's fine." The day had drained me, and my patience was running thin. "We'll talk tomorrow," I said, clinging to the hope she'd open up. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard her muffled, barely audible sobs. She buried her face in the pillow, trying to stifle the sounds, though I doubted she found any real rest. Her anguish reminded me of Oedipus, haunted, tormented by the secrets within. Saturday arrived, and Nora was on edge, snapping at minor things. If we had a pet, it would wisely stay out of her way. Despite her promise, the conversation about the doctor never happened, and every time I brought it up, she deflected. She avoided me most of the day. Finally, after lunch, I managed to catch her alone. Trying to lighten the mood, I said, "I booked us a table at the Crab for 7. You love that place. Maybe it'll help?" She just shrugged, her face expressionless. I left her alone, but an hour later, I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. I entered with a box from her favorite boutique. "I have a little surprise for you," I said, handing her the box. She didn't open it or react, and the silence grew heavy. "I thought you might want to wear it tonight," I added, hoping to ease the tension. When she finally came downstairs, dressed in the new outfit, I told her how beautiful she looked. "I had one more gift, saving it for a special occasion," I said, offering her another box. "But now seems like the right time." She tore off the wrapping, peeked inside, and suddenly began to cry. "They'll go perfectly with your dress," I said quietly, hoping the pearls might bring her a small measure of happiness. But dinner passed in awkward silence. She spoke so softly that the waitress had to lean in to hear her order. Even after 3 glasses of wine, her lips remained tightly sealed. Most of her meal went untouched and was eventually packed to go. When we returned, she exited the car before I had even unbuckled. She paused, glanced back for a moment. "Thank you," she mumbled. Those were the first words she'd spoken in hours. I watched her go upstairs and shut herself in the bathroom. I approached quietly and listened. My suspicions were confirmed. She was talking to Taylor, likely calming him, perhaps assuring him they'd be together soon. Back in my study, a heavy sense of despair washed over me. I took a small bottle from my pocket and swallowed a few pills, a habit I'd developed since discovering her infidelity. It was the only thing that kept my mind from crumbling. Later, I saw her downstairs again, holding a glass, still in the black dress I had gifted her. Despite everything, I couldn't deny how captivating she looked. She noticed my gaze but quickly turned away. Even though I had prepared myself for this, the realization still hit hard. Trying to stay composed, I pretended to read as she finally entered the room. She lingered in silence, which felt like an eternity, then broke it with small talk. "Sebastian," she said softly, "is that book interesting?" Her detached tone and downcast eyes spoke volumes. Our marriage was over. I had been preparing for this conversation for weeks, rehearsing my response, convincing myself to stay calm. Carefully marking my page, I closed the book and replied, "Not as interesting as our marriage once was." Meeting her gaze, I asked, "What's on your mind, Nora? Can you finally tell me what's bothering you?" Her eyes filled with tears, and I softened my voice. "What happened, my love?" Gently taking her hands, I waited in silence, hoping she would finally give me an answer. She was already crying. "Did the doctor give you bad news?" I asked, feeling the tension in the room as thick as fog. "No," she replied, her voice cutting through the silence. "Is it about your mother? Did something happen to her?" I asked gently, trying not to rush, but she shook her head. "Then, could it be something with your father?" I managed to ask before she firmly shook her head again. "I'm fine, really, it's something else," she mumbled. Trying to comfort her, I stood up and slowly pulled a chair away from the octagonal table, gesturing for her to sit. Once she sat down, I whispered, "I'll be right back." She looked up at me, her red, swollen eyes filled with confusion and pain. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Just for a minute," I replied, trying to reassure her. "I need to grab something upstairs." I headed to my study, opened the safe, and took out my briefcase and laptop. When I returned, she was sitting there, hands resting at her sides, her gaze distant and tired. I placed the bag next to me and began clearing the chess pieces from the board. Each piece fell to the floor with a dull thud, echoing in the stillness of the room. She watched me, her gaze a mix of sadness and bewilderment. I opened my laptop and started typing. "What are you doing?" she asked, tension thick in her voice. I simply held a finger to my lips. "Almost done," I whispered. The room filled with the sounds of typing and her uneven breathing. After a few minutes, I gently closed the laptop. "There. Now please tell me what's on your mind," I softly urged. Her face twisted with emotion. and she began to cry again. I handed her a tissue, quietly waiting for her to gather herself. With difficulty, she finally whispered, I don't want to hurt you. You're everything a husband should be. I remained silent, sensing she needed time to find the right words. Sebastian, she continued, her voice trembling, I really love you, but I'm no longer in love with you. At last, she said it. Nora buried her face in her hands. I can't even explain how it happened, her voice heavy with shame and sorrow. Pain tore through me, but I stayed quiet, giving her space to understand her own feelings. We've been together since high school, from our freshman year, she went on, breaking the silence. We were always Sebastian and Nora, but now, I feel like I need time to figure out who I am outside of that. So you're saying you don't love me anymore because we seem like the perfect couple? I asked, confused. No, she replied with a hint of frustration. That's not what I mean. Then say it again, I insisted. You said you don't love me anymore, but I don't understand. Please, explain. You just won't get it, she sighed. You're a successful businessman. You have everything you worked for. And me? I feel like I'm disappearing, fading into your shadow. So this is my fault? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. It's not about your career, Sebastian, she replied, almost with a sense of desperation. I waited, giving her the space to express something that was clearly hard to put into words. Have you thought about seeing a family therapist? I asked finally. That's not exactly what I meant, she admitted, her voice faltering. Then the next step is divorce, I said bluntly. No, not that, Sebastian, you don't understand. I want to find a way to strengthen us, to rebuild what we have, she pleaded. Then what do you suggest? I asked, feeling my patience start to wane. Her voice softened, and she finally said, I was thinking, maybe we should try living apart for a while. I took a deep breath, clenching my fists. All right, I said slowly. Explain it to me. She looked surprised, but I wasn't about to give up. Didn't Amy from your office go through something similar with her husband? I interrupted her. What issue? She asked warily. The one I just mentioned. She felt like she'd lost herself in her marriage. Isn't that the whole point of marriage? Two people becoming one? I continued. So, how long do you think this finding yourself should take? I pressed. I reminded her that Amy and her husband, after some time apart, decided to start dating each other again, even considering reconciliation. Dating? I asked. Is that your plan? While you're away, are you planning to see other people? Or is there already someone specific waiting for you? No, she replied firmly. I told you, I love you. I'm not looking for anyone else. I just need a little space to find myself again. That doesn't answer my question, I replied, keeping my tone steady. And after you leave, where exactly do you plan to go? A long silence hung between us before she finally answered. I thought I'd stay nearby, she admitted quietly. It's different for a man, I said, struggling to contain my irritation. A woman alone, it's riskier. She gave a short, bitter laugh. That's not going to happen. Don't treat me like I'm helpless. Please, Sebastian, stop being so unreasonable. Unreasonable? I retorted sharply, barely holding my voice in check. I'm the one fighting for our marriage, trying to keep us together. How is leaving supposed to make us stronger? You're breaking the promises we made to each other. To be there, for better or worse. Remember those? Sebastian, you're not seeing this the way I am, she pleaded. I shook my head. Right. You keep repeating that we'll stay together. But your promises? They don't mean anything to me anymore. Please don't say that, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'll say it as many times as I need to. What changed? What exactly made you so unhappy with us? It wasn't one thing, she finally replied after a pause. It's more like 100 small things piling up, like when we were at the country club and the doorman called me Mrs. Brown. I frowned. You were upset because he showed you respect? Is that the problem? No, Sebastian, she said irritably. It's just hundreds of little things that I can't even explain. She fell silent, as if expecting me to say something, but I remained quiet. After a long silence, I pulled 2 folders with legal documents from my briefcase and placed them on the table. Then I opened my laptop, selected a file, and turned the screen toward her. "This," I said, and images appeared on the screen showing her holding hands with another man as they entered a hotel. The photos changed every few seconds, each one capturing her breaking her vows. Her face turned pale, and she slumped in her chair, unconscious. I waited, then brought her a glass of water, helping her take a sip as she came to, her expression one of growing panic. "How long have you known?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "How long have I known that the woman who swore fidelity betrayed me?" "Long enough." I slid the signed divorce papers across the table. She stared at the papers, speechless. "You broke our vows. This is the end. Sign, and I can finally let go." She clutched the papers tightly, as if afraid they'd disappear, her eyes scanning the lines that clearly stated that the reason for our separation was infidelity. Attached to the document, Evidence B, were about 24 photos with annotations. When Nora saw them, she screamed, "Oh God, no!" Her fists pounded the table, and she sobbed something incoherent. Watching the woman I once loved finally grasp the irreversible consequences of her actions was not a moment that brought me any satisfaction. As the reality of our marriage's collapse hit her, she seemed to shrink, like a shadow of herself. I wondered if she truly believed I would somehow come to terms with her betrayal. With each new photo, her cries grew louder, and my disgust only deepened. Thankfully, I had taken nearly an overwhelming dose of sedative to withstand this moment. Otherwise, I might have faltered. I would have chosen death over this, but the pill bottle was empty. Nora collapsed to the floor, clutching at my leg, whispering one word, "Please." I resisted the urge to crush her fingers under my heel. Instead, I moved my chair back, staying out of her reach. Even though I knew how it would end, there was still a surreal feeling about it all. Closing my eyes, I tried to convince myself it was a nightmare I could wake up from. But when I opened them again, I remained in this dark reality, where the ghost of my past life mocked me with every breath. The doorbell snapped me back to the present. "I'll be right back," I muttered. 2 men entered, carrying boxes. We exchanged a few words and they headed toward the wardrobe in the master bedroom. Hiring movers to pack up my wife's belongings hadn't been cheap, but it was worth every penny. Nora lifted her head, her voice barely audible as she asked, "Who are they?" "Refer to document A. Our prenuptial agreement states that infidelity strips you of everything, including this house," I replied. "They're here to pack your things. I've rented a storage unit near your office and paid for the first and last months. Today, you're moving out." Nora's screams filled the room. "I can't believe this is happening." She curled up, crying. "What did you expect when you decided to sleep with your boss?" I retorted. "Oh, Sebastian, I didn't," she stammered. "Can I explain?" "It's too late. You lied and cheated. There are a few things you should know," I continued. "The lease on your car is under the company's name. I've taken your keys. It will be repossessed tomorrow morning. Your credit cards have been canceled. Your phone will be disconnected tomorrow, and your name is removed from our accounts. No one at the country club will respect you anymore." My phone rang. Looking at the screen, I answered, "It's all set. Thank you." I paused. "Oh, you might be interested to know. Your lover's wife, who is pregnant, threw him out of their house when my investigator handed her these photos." I turned the screen toward Nora, showing her yet another compromising shot. "I warned you he was a womanizer," I reminded her. "But you called me foolish. 2 weeks later, he was in bed with you. His wife threatened to divorce him if he cheated again. And for your information, you're the 3rd woman he's cheated with. You won't need to worry about a life alone anymore." Nora's phone rang. "Let me guess. Your lover with good news?" I snatched the phone and shattered it on the floor, ending the call. Her face twisted in horror, her eyes filled with fear. "You planned every step, didn't you?" she whispered. "Yes. My lawyer will meet with your employer tomorrow. Given company policy, I expect you'll be fired for immoral behavior along with your lover. Do they pay unemployment benefits to idiots?" The doorbell rang a second time. "I'll be right back," I said. Nora sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, making strange sounds. A gray-suited elderly man entered the room behind me. "This is Mr. Jackson, the notary. He'll witness your signature on the divorce papers along with the movers." She asked a faint question. "And if I refuse to sign?" "Then I'll press send, and everyone you know, family, friends, colleagues, people from church, women at the club, will receive an email with evidence of your affair. There's even a video. Do you have anything to say that might change my mind?" Her face went blank. "If you had been honest with me today, I would have done everything to save our marriage." "But all you did was lie," I said, my voice trembling with anger I'd held back for so long. "You betrayed me, betrayed us. I hate you like I've never hated anyone, and that frightens me. 3 months ago, you were my everything. Now it's all dead. This is a no-fault divorce. I have a second set of documents stating irreconcilable differences. Sign them, leave my house, and I won't tell anyone the truth." 10 minutes later, her signature was witnessed and notarized. As she waited for the taxi on the driveway to the cheap motel I'd booked for her, she looked dazed, empty. 3 years have passed, and I've kept my promise not to tell anyone, until now. I punished her, left her impoverished and jobless. As far as I know, she never found another relationship and works at a fast food restaurant. And me? I'm a successful man with a wonderful, faithful wife and a little daughter. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.